On today's episode, we're sitting down with our friend and perinatal mental health certified powerhouse, Patience Riley. Patience is a licensed mental health therapist, a foodie, a military spouse, and a mother of two. We'll hear all about how loneliness and isolation played a role in her transition to motherhood, especially with a partner on deployment. Patience is behind some pretty incredible work here at PSI as the communications manager of the Perinatal Mental Health Alliance for People of Color, and we are absolutely thrilled to bring you her story. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the I Am One podcast are the speaker's own. Tuning into this podcast is not a replacement for therapy or any other form of professional help. Our discussions cover personal stories of perinatal mental health disorders and may feel triggering to some listeners. Your number one priority is to take care of yourself. So if you are in need of support, please reach out to the PSI Helpline by calling or texting HELP to 1-800-944-4773 for help in English and in Spanish. At PSI, we want you to know you are not alone, you are not to blame, and with help, you will be well. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Patience, welcome to the pod, my friend. We are almost fresh off of seeing each other at the PSI conference this summer in Kansas City in person. And it feels so good to have you here in the studio with us. I have missed your face. And we are so excited to talk work stuff. Pretty cool that all three of us get to call this work stuff. But we're also really excited to dive into more personal things and talk about your lived experience with perinatal mental health complications. So all of that to say, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I think we should just jump right in. I mean, without any further ado.
Water's warm. Let's do it.
Let's just jump right in. Patience, could you give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are?
Yeah, I'm Patience Riley. I am a mom of two. I'm a creative. I love yoga. After trying it 3 times, I have to say, that's kind of the interesting fun fact about that. I love anything spicy. I'm a military spouse. I am a licensed therapist as well. That's how I got introduced to PSI, was working with clients and they were looking for resources and I was trying to look for resources for them. And then that's where I ended up finding out about PSI, ended up having my first baby. I have 2 little boys who are 2 and 4. Their initials are RAR, both of them, which is very fitting with how they act. They're roaring everywhere and roaring everywhere. And I currently live in Georgia right now. Like I said, since I'm a military spouse, I bounce around, but I am currently in Georgia, originally from Goose Creek, South Carolina, which people typically know of Charleston, South Carolina, a little bit more. But yeah, and aside from that, like you said, we get to do this work together. We get to call this work. So aside from my private practice that I have where I see clients virtually in Georgia and Nebraska, I'm also the communications manager with the Perinatal Mental Health Alliance for People of Color. So that is how we were able to kind of, come together and be able to work together. And like you said, call this stuff that we call work, even though it doesn't always feel like work.
Pretty lucky.
That's the truth. It rarely feels like work.
Well, Patience, we would love if you're ready to kind of dive into some even more personal stuff, telling us a little bit more about your lived experience with perinatal mental health complications.
Yeah. So like I said, I do have 2 little boys. And so starting out with my first would be kind of where I got my first introduction, as I like to say, to at least the complication part of perinatal mental health. And after having him, I knew becoming a mother and being a mom was going to be hard. It was going to be difficult. And just a little background and insight into me. At first, I didn't even want to have children.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I didn't even want to have children at first. But my husband and I, he's my college sweetheart, and we had been together and have been together for a really long time. And I remember he's always known that I didn't really want children, and he did. And I remember him telling me, like, you know what? You're enough. And if you don't want to have children, then that's fine with me. And so that really gave me like a time to have a moment of reflection,
Mhm.
to think back and say, is it really a hard no? Like, is
Mm.
not having kids really a hard no? So, like, 2 or 3 years go by, and then
Mhm.
I'm like, you know what? It's not a hard no. And so that's what kind of got me into that realm. But I always knew it was going to be very, very difficult and challenging and be something hard. I don't know why I thought that,
Mm.
but I was just like, I knew that it was going to be difficult. And I don't know if I felt like I wasn't up for the job or up for the
Mm.
task. And maybe that was some of that underlying to it.
Oh,
But
interesting.
after having my first, I was like, wow, this really is hard. And it's even harder than you thought it was going to be. And that really hit me with mostly, I had a lot of sleep deprivation. My first did not sleep. He did not sleep well until he was 18 months old.
Uh-oh.
hmm And so we all know that not getting sleep
It's a problem.
is like, I'm like, when your sleep's a mess, your mental health is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yes.
where I was like, that was really my first introduction. And I do think the big, big thing that like contributed was I was not sleeping well
Mm-hmm.
at all because like he was just constantly up. I was nursing. And so I was constantly up like every 50 minutes,
Right.
nursing in pain.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Nebraska at the time, and we had a strong support system of friends, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily family, but we did have a strong support system. However, my husband ended up going to training when my son was 6 months old. And so I was by myself when he was 6 months old. But within the month, my mom came up and like I handled all the moving stuff, and me and him lived with my folks for a couple of months until my husband got out of training. So also a lot of transitions, and I think that's a lot of why my oldest was not sleeping very well
Mm-hmm.
because we were moving around.
Yeah.
Then we moved again from my parents' place to Florida and had our time there. But it wasn't until we really got here to Georgia where he started sleeping well. So we were doing a
Wow.
lot of bouncing around. So I moved like 3 different places in like a year. And also
Wow.
COVID hit within that time.
Oh no. Of course.
But my biggest thing was like, I wasn't necessarily like sad. I wasn't crying or
Mm-hmm.
those types of things. That didn't really happen. I may have had a moment or so where that, like, just being so overwhelmed that it might happen. But I was the agitated person. I was the angry
Oh.
person. Mhm.
Relatable.
So you feel me?
Yeah.
So that was the thing where I was that person. I was the one where it's like you don't necessarily realize that the reason why I'm so angry, the reason why I'm so upset, the reason why all of these things are happening is because of all these other unmet needs
Mm-hmm.
or change, things that are happening, or even just this is a symptom
Mm-hmm. Right.
that I feel like when I think about this with like my therapist brain, with the
Mm-hmm.
clinical brain, and we think about depression, we equate anger and agitation with teenagers when they're depressed, but we
Right.
don't relate it to pregnant and postpartum people. And I don't understand why. That's not a thing. Like, why all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that's how teenagers show that they're, feeling depressed, but we don't relate it to that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think like that education piece of like, if someone is angry, it's not necessarily that they need anger management.
Right.
They've got some unmet needs somewhere, right?
They got unmet needs somewhere. And so that was my introduction. But
Mm-hmm.
with my other little one, y'all, it was the story just piles up.
Uh-oh.
Want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Sure. I
Okay.
mean, part of the reason why we're here. But that's where I say, like, with Remy, my oldest, is when I say like that third eye was kind of open, where I was just like, wow, these are some of the things that my clients came in here and they were talking to me about and they were expressing. So I then just really felt like it was almost like that aha, like I really get it is almost kind of what I would tell myself. Like I was just kind of thinking back to some of those sessions and some of those conversations. And I was like, wow, that I felt like Remy was really my introduction. And he gave me the like, this is what I need to focus on. This is what I need to do from that glimpse of that lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got pregnant with Reed, my second, in 2021.
Oh, also.
Yeah, so still a pandemic.
I mean, what else did you have going on, right? No, I'm
And
kidding.
that's the thing. It's like, what else is anyone doing? But during that time, but I got pregnant with him in 2021. So I have a 2-year-old at this point.
Okay.
I'm pregnant. We do live in Georgia now, so we are closer to family. But when it comes to Reed and it comes to that story, I think I was like the perfect ball and storm of risk factor. And as we go along, you two will probably be like, check, 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 check. Others are probably going to listen and be like, wow, okay, I see what you're saying about that. Because had him, and one of the things that I think that COVID did is that we had an experience with our other moves is we were all encouraged to stay away from people. We were encouraged not to be around others. So when you move to a new place because we PCS, we couldn't develop a community.
Can you tell us what PCS is for people who don't speak military?
You're going to need to break down the acronyms for us, patients.
I'm so sorry. So when we PCS, when we move.
Yeah.
So when we moved from one duty station to another duty station, that was the big thing with COVID, right? Because nobody was wanting to spread and things of that nature. However, when you experience a move, whether it is a PCS because of the military, or maybe you're just moving because of another job, or you're just moving for just better opportunities, things like that. During that time, we were encouraged not to engage with folks. So of course, we were meeting our neighbors at 6 feet apart from each other.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we're and so it's hard to develop friendships, relationships, a sense of community when you're kind of encouraged not to. That added something different to the mix that we hadn't experienced before, because it almost was just okay, stay with your little bubble, which is your family, and don't really interact with other folks outside of video or phone and things of that nature. So that's where I look at risk factor number one, a lack of a close community, an immediate community in my area. Unfortunately, that did not get built around that time.
Right.
And I think, and that I know was a huge factor with it. Also, another thing, I had my son in August, and then my husband ended up going on a deployment. So this is a period of time where he is away from us, away from our family, and he ended up going to Germany. So he went out of the country.
How long was the deployment?
He was deployed for about 5 or 6 months.
Oh, wow.
I had a baby the end of August. I have a 2.5-year-old. At this time now, I have not developed an immediate community around me. And we found out about a month before he was due to leave that he was leaving. So we had very little preparation time.
Right.
And I remember saying to myself, I was doing so well. I remember saying that to myself when I found out that he was being deployed. And y'all, I was pissed.
I mean, it makes sense.
Right.
And so that's the thing. So that's where I'm just risk factor number 2, because like I said, my little bubble that I had, that the only community that I could really have, a big piece of that, I was this is going to be gone in a month. I've been doing great. That's what I kept telling myself. I've been doing great. Sleep has been better this time around.
Yep. You had a partner there, right? So you were working like a team?
Working like a team. my body was healing better just because I was in a lot of pain and stuff like that healing the first time. But I was just like, my body's healing better this go around versus last go around. So I did a lot of like kind of comparisons from that beginning part. And I was like, but I'm just doing so well. And this is going to ruin it. And honestly, that's when things started to go downhill.
Before he left, even like when the news came, that was the moment.
When the news came, like I said, I was already angry. And so it literally like snowballed from that, where I got angrier and angrier.
I want to clarify. So you said I was already angry. Do you mean like before you found out that this move was coming? No. Like when you heard, then that was like the inception point.
That was
for the anger. And then he leaves and you're like, well, let's double down on it. Like, is that sort of how that went?
It got worse. Yeah. Because that's the thing. I would say that was probably the switch. Like, that was my trigger. That was definitely the trigger. Finding out that my husband was leaving, that was the trigger. I was mad at the Air Force. I was mad at him. I was just mad because I was like, now I'm going to have a 3-month-old and a 2-year-old. He left right after Thanksgiving. It was the holidays. So I was like, there goes Christmas. There goes my birthday. There goes my son's birthday. There goes all of these like milestones and mile markers. And I was just like, I don't have that much support. And I was like, my support is being ripped from me. So that was really my trigger, that trigger that kind of sent me down. And it was just, of course, managing the two. I was solo parenting at the time. So trying to deal with a 2-year-old and a newborn, it was not easy.
And trying to meet your needs, or some of them, even one of them.
It was tricky. It was not easy at all. And so that's where, for me, like anger came back up.
Yeah.
Like of being incredibly, incredibly angry. And I know it was because I had those unmet needs. It just wasn't being met at all.
I have a question. How did the anger come out? Like, was it just under the surface and sort of like boiling all the time? Or was it like, were there periods where you were like rage out loud? Like, how did that look?
So no like throwing things or anything like that. A lot of mine was bubble, trying to keep it together, like attempting to do that, more so just because of having to take care of the little people and not
But
wanting
that's exhausting. Like you're literally
Very.
holding a lid on the boiling pot of anger and trying to keep people alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. Trying to do that and then trying to have those moments. I remember having like shower moments because like the shower can conceal noise. And that's where I could not full on like yell, scream, but that's where I felt like I could actually release.
Like cry?
No, not necessarily a cry, not a full on out scream, but I would say like at a lower octave level that I felt like wouldn't alarm the kids.
Oh, okay.
So you're growling in the shower.
I'm growling.
Just okay, fair.
Grumbling along. Okay.
But louder than a growl. That's the thing, because a shower can conceal. It can conceal so that my kiddos aren't scared, that my kiddos aren't like woken up, that they're not there, but it's that amount of time. Or even Danny, not very often, but sometimes a cry.
Yeah.
But not as often.
Okay.
The time that I did have my big crying moment that happened, after that I called my mom, because when I got brought to tears, like that for me, and it was just like uncontrollable crying. So not just you all understand, like the uncontrollable bawling, I can't get myself back together.
That's the point where you're like, oh, maybe something's going on here. Like it's a little bit bigger than, I mean, it doesn't happen every day, maybe, but like It was alarming enough that it's like you knew you needed to say something.
It was enough where my mom would try to come on the weekends. A girlfriend of mine would try to come on the weekends. Friends of mine from a distance, they were so sweet, so supportive. They would, check in on me, things like that. But one day or a couple of days a month wasn't enough relief.
Yeah.
It just wasn't enough. One of my old coworkers, she could give me one Saturday a month. And she let me know. She was like, I'm all yours. This Saturday, I'm all yours.
That's awesome.
And that's what she was able to do. And I'm so grateful for what people could do.
Yeah.
It just, unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. I was drowning. That's the thing. Me concealing. And now, with you kind of asking that made me it brought me back to those shower moments that I had forgotten that I had. But I had them because, like I said, I could conceal them from the kids because I didn't want the kids to know.
And apparently from yourself.
And from myself, right? But that big time bawling and not being able to stop, that's when I called my mom. And I was just like, yeah, you know that how you said that me and the boys should come and stay with y'all?
What are you doing tomorrow?
Yeah.
Make the bed.
Or tonight.
Yeah. So that's when I did let her know. I was like, it's time that we come. It is time that we actually come. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So my mom was like, cool. All right. She was just like, well, I will be there on this day. She left her car at my house. Me and the boys packed up our stuff. So I really just spent my time packing up our stuff, packed up my car, and I drove down to my parents' house. And I lived with them for about at least the last month of the deployment. So I went 4 or 5 months, y'all.
Wow. Patience.
That's exhausting.
Don't do this, y'all.
No.
Listeners, don't do what I did. That's the part of listening to this. I wish I would have accepted the help that was extended to me earlier. And I say that because my dad was like, you can come stay with us. My mom was like, hey, you can come stay with us. However, they weren't too forceful with it. They just kind of threw in those reminders of you can come stay with us. Or I understand you don't want to pack up your whole house, because that's what I would say to them. And then they were just like, let me just remind you, you can come. And so it wasn't until I had that uncontrollable, I can't stop myself moment of, oh, call your mom and just go stay with her. Just go there. Go there instead and stop trying to do it all by yourself.
How did it feel when you came to that conclusion?
Good. I should have done this 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Honestly, I probably should have went with my parents when they came to visit for Christmas. We should have just went back and stayed with them. When I think back on it, I think about how my parents kind of fluctuated and they operated. My dad works all day, every day. He kind of always has, but he didn't when I was there.
Oh.
My dad he would come home early. He always had the same routine, even when I was a kid. He would come home. He would usually just, immediately Mr. Rogers, it's let me change my clothes. How, so he would.
Oh, he took his sweater. He took his work sweater off. He put his home sweater on, changed into his house shoes.
So how it's just like Mr. Rogers, it's oh, you have on your house clothes now. So he'd come home, he put on his house clothes, his lounge clothes, and he would immediately play with the boys.
Oh.
That was his first go-to. And what it did is it gave me even that relief. I knew someone was coming. That's the thing. And he would come home early, and he would come home early with food. And
yeah.
Because that was a big thing. Another thing that I realized with myself was I wasn't eating.
Now, was it you didn't have time and capacity to do the thing, or?
For me, I was not hungry.
Oh.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the thing. And so that's another one of my signs and symptoms. So not only
Mhm.
was I agitated, angry, having those shower moments, but I also wasn't eating because I just did not have the appetite. It wasn't because
Mm.
I was too busy. It wasn't because of this.
Right.
Because when I found out that my husband was leaving, I did start to see clients again. However, I let them know, like, hey, my husband went on a deployment.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I was not diving back into work like that. My big focus was just keeping my kids alive. So
Mhm.
Yep.
that was like focus number one was just keep the children alive. So that wasn't as much as like a strain because I just was like easing into that piece of things. So I had time to technically cook. I had time to like eat something, but I
Mhm.
didn't have an appetite. And one of my girlfriends that came on the weekend, she looked at me one time while she was there and she was like, hey, you know, coffee isn't food, right?
What?
What?
I put creamer in there. Like it's fine, right?
For her, it was not a meal. And so she was just like,
Yeah, it's not a meal,
Yeah.
and she was
listeners.
like,
You heard it here. It's coffee's not a meal. All right.
so she told me that. And she's like, it's like 3 o'clock and you haven't eaten anything.
Were you surprised by that? Like,
Yeah, I was like, you're absolutely right. Like, I did not think about it until she said it. And then I'm like, you're right. I probably should eat something. Like, you are absolutely right. So, and then I was also nursing at the time too. So
oh,
I should have been hungry. So all of those things, I'm chasing a 2-year old, I'm nursing a baby. And that's the other thing when I think about my story too with Reed versus Remy is I had a lot of issues nursing my second.
mm.
And I did not have those issues when I nursed my first at
Because it
all.
was more difficult or
Mhm.
okay.
So Reed, my second, had a really hard time latching. He was chomping versus
Oh,
like suckling
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
instead.
Mhm.
So it was very painful.
note to children, please don't chomp.
Yeah, it was extremely painful nursing him. He was kind of going in between drinking formula as well as nursing. He ended up being admitted to the NICU after we had him, and that was a little unexpected as well.
Mm.
So like
There's
when
another
I
check mark.
Right.
so that's what I'm saying when I'm telling y'all that like I had some check marks, I
Mhm.
Mhm.
definitely had some check marks when it's like, you know what? It's not surprising that you were struggling. It's not a surprise. I just feel like with the deployment, that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back
Mhm.
with it,
Yeah.
where it was just like, you know what? Despite the NICU stay, despite the issues with breastfeeding, because I was just like, well, I did this okay the first time. And I did receive lactation support, thank goodness,
Oh,
because that
great.
was so helpful. Lactation support changed
Yeah.
like the trajectory of our like I probably would not have nursed him if I had not received that lactation support because I
Mm.
was at the point where I was gonna give up. Like I was just like, I'm in so much pain. Like that
Mhm.
was my biggest thing. I was just in so much pain. And then he kind of seemed to favor the bottles at the time that he was getting. So I was like, well, if you're gonna, maybe I'll just pump instead. But the lactation support changed that. So like even despite that, I was like, okay, you know what? That went well. That went well. Yeah, I'm having to chase around Remy, but we've gotten like both of our moms have come. Then we kind of timed out where my husband could take some time off. He, saved up some leave and vacation. He could take some of that time off so that when that deployment came, it like sucker punched me.
Mhm.
And then that's where all the trickle that I was telling you all about. And the other thing on top of that, of like, I know we were talking kind of about like what were some of the like things that I experienced specifically outside of the agitation, the rage, the not eating, is I was lonely, So like isolation and loneliness because I was truly in a house by myself. Like,
Yeah.
so it's also just not, I had the sense of loneliness, even though I had a distant support system, but I was also physically lonely.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like both of them. It wasn't just like I felt lonely. I really was lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be on a Zoom screen with somebody, but the Zoom screen turns off and then you're by yourself and it's all you.
Right. And also, I would argue you could be very lonely and be in a room filled with people.
Exactly. Like it is really just you here,
Mhm.
you and these two people,
Mhm.
two little people.
Yeah.
It's just you and them.
Mhm.
So getting in the car and going to stay with your parents, was that like the silver bullet that like everything started to like right itself at that point? Or
Mhm.
did you have to do anything else? Or was
So
that the
that
one thing? Was that like magic?
that changed the trajectory of my story.
Mm,
That in itself.
great. Yay.
That changed the trajectory of my
Mhm.
story. So interesting enough. So I'm also a support group leader with PSI.
Ooh.
Mhm.
So still am a support group leader. I was not leading support groups during that time. I was on quote unquote maternity leave from support groups.
Right. You
Yeah.
were on, I need to attend support groups.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Yeah. And that
Yes.
it's also important to say to anybody listening, if you are a volunteer of PSI or are thinking of being a volunteer of PSI, it is okay to take a break from your volunteer
Mhm.
role and come on back when you're, ready and have capacity. So great.
PSI
Yeah.
encourages it.
Yeah. And so that was the beautiful thing is that I was on break from that. However, I wasn't 100% sure about attending attending a group that I once led.
Oh.
So
Mhm.
then you start to be like, it's a peer-to-peer model, but that it's like that shame and that guilt, right?
Oh.
That kind of sinks in where it's like,
Mhm.
oh goodness, like how do I navigate that? And like I'm looking at this like amazing thing that I know exists,
Mhm.
but I'm just like, should I? And just not even like, just not being sure how to navigate that. And then I know before my husband even we found out about the deployment and stuff like that, one of the things that I did was I looked into a therapist. I believe in therapy. Big shocker. I believe in therapy, but I was looking for a therapist because I was like, things are going so well right now, and I want things to continue to go well.
Right.
So I was just before I even had my son, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna look like I just need to get connected with a therapist in Georgia and things of that nature. I can
Mhm.
see them virtual. Unfortunately, the consultations that I had didn't work out the best.
Like it didn't feel like a good fit? You didn't
Yeah, the
click?
vibe
Okay.
wasn't there.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we either just didn't click because the vibe was off. I'm
Mm.
really big in that. That's why I
Mhm.
like to have consultations with people,
Yes.
whether, because I'm like,
Yeah.
feel people out. See,
Mhm.
you can tell a lot from a consultation and talking with them. And so for when I was seeking and looking for someone at that time, like I said, I was doing well, but I was just like, you know what? I still want to do well. So let me just look for someone. So since I was doing well, I was just like, well, you're just kind of being proactive. And
Yeah.
if the appointment is 2 months from now, it's not a big deal. Don't even worry about it. If I would have known then what I know now, I would have just scheduled the appointment because who knows, that 2 month later mark, that might have been that starting point of where I wasn't doing well, right? So, Emily, kind of to go to what you were saying, that was the big turning point because some of the other avenues that I was like, oh, let me just be proactive because I'm feeling good. I want to still feel good. Meet with a therapist. It didn't
Yeah.
really work
Yeah.
out, or the consult didn't really work out. Some
Mm.
of the things that I knew about, I kind of felt that shame and that guilt of like, ooh, should I really pop into group? Should I really, I just not really knowing how to explore that.
Did you
So,
ever go?
mm-mm,
I bet it would
mm-mm.
have been fine.
I'm sure it would. And that's the thing. That's why I say it's the shame and the guilt piece. Another symptom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the thing. So that's where I'm just like, all of these different symptoms and things kind of pop up and interweave, I think, in our stories that maybe we don't realize at the time.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It was huge to me because I was struggling. However, those support group leaders wouldn't have cared if I showed up. It wouldn't have been like, what are you doing here? It would have been like, I'm glad that you're here.
Oh, yeah. To hold space for a fellow support group leader, it's like,
That's what shame can do to us, though. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Shame can tell us lies.
I was just going to say, it's telling you stories and stopped you in your tracks.
It
Yeah.
did.
Mhm.
That's the thing. It, like, the shame and guilt, it guilted me out of help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. It guilted me out of support. It guilted me out of community, because I was being told those things at that time by my own brain, right? And then also telling myself, girl, you know these things.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you do. Like that also being a thing. I'm just like, therapists are people as well. We need help, we need support. But also, I'm hoping that for like the other providers, that even if you do specialize in this and you work with folks around this, and then you yourself find yourself sitting back like how I did and saying, dang, I understood. I was walking alongside them, but now I really feel like I was sitting in your shoes. I felt like I was
Yeah.
sitting in their space of like in the chair.
Mhm.
I was thinking about other clients, like where we would just get on the floor because they had their baby with them. And I was just like, I really felt like I had swapped places with her.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I really get this. And I'm like, I see how difficult it was for you to share your anger, how you were raging, because that's me too. I was so guilted out of, like I said, I knew of a beautiful resource that was sitting right there that honestly no one was going to shame and guilt me out of. It was just
Yeah.
me.
So what you move in with your parents, you're getting better. Like, is that essentially the end of your story? Like, at what point did you go back to leading support groups for PSI? Like,
Mhm.
where in this story did you go to the PSI conference and meet
Mm.
Oh.
Andrea?
2022, we bring us to that point. 2022, my husband got back in April.
And you're like, I'm going to a conference in June.
So
Bye.
what's interesting, y'all, before my husband left, I had applied and had gotten accepted to present at PSI's conference,
Woo.
at 2020 Moms Symposium, and at the National Board of Certified Counselors. Found that out before he was supposed to leave.
Well, then.
So, of course, I was just
Patience.
like, yes, I'm going to do this.
Mhm.
And you're like, pardon me while my you know what hits the fan. Like,
Yes.
while all of this is happening.
So I found out about all these lovely, beautiful, amazing opportunities. And then I found out that my husband was leaving. Now, he ended up leaving before one, like he left and he was gone during one of the events, but he wasn't gone for all three of them. So 2020 Moms, which is now the Policy Center of Maternal Mental Health, they had their symposium. And so that was virtual. But at this point, I was already living with my parents. So part of starting to feel like myself again was, like we said, we enjoy this type of work. And ding, 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 what was I presenting on? How to support military families during pregnancy and postpartum.
Let me draw you a roadmap, friends. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was able to use myself as a case study.
Oh.
That is fantastic.
In my own work, I was
Mhm.
able to use myself as a case study. And
Mhm.
I presented on I presented on that topic for the Policy Center for National Board of Certified Counselors, as well
Mhm.
as PSI. So that was the nice thing. And I was like, able to I really was passionate because, right, I was living it also and had worked with military folks a lot and things of that nature. So it was just hand in hand from my work, from what I was experiencing and all of that. So when I
Yeah.
moved in with my folks, that was because I got some relief, I was able to actually get back to some of patience.
Oh, that feels good.
And
Uh-huh.
but I was able to, if I was having a moment or if I was trying to tackle the 2-year-old and the baby needed something, someone could swoop in and assist, or vice versa. Or, hey, we got the kids, go do this, or go take a nap because it doesn't seem like you and maybe the baby
Bye.
was
See you
up.
later.
Yeah.
Don't have to ask me twice.
Yeah. So the baby was up. So go take a nap. Or my mom would have my oldest so that I only had to deal with one. But then my dad decided, well, I'm coming home at noon now. So then he's like, let me hold the baby. And I'm like, so it was
Here.
just to have that much support and help. It was just such a big relief. I really felt like that weight, that heaviness that was on me due to those circumstances, that whole thing was just this ugly cloud that I just felt like it was just over me the whole time. I just had this ugly cloud. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
went to my parents, I felt like that's where it just was you know what, we're not so dark and rainy. And then it started to become, as each day went by, it was less cloudy. So it wasn't oh, I went to my parents' house and I had the rainbow. No,
Right.
not yet. It was coming. That's the thing. It came, but it went from pouring down thunderstorms to it wasn't pouring on me anymore, but maybe it was dark clouds. So then they were
Mm-hmm.
gray clouds. So then they were the white clouds where you're I like that. Then we can just kind of be those misty ones. And then I got the sun that came out. And then I got my rainbow after all of
Right.
those showers, right?
Which I think is true of everyone's recovery, right? There is no sudden fix ever. It's
Mm-mm.
always work.
It's work. It took me accepting help to get to my rainbow.
Mm.
I needed to accept the help that was offered to me. Maybe it wasn't the exact idea.
But it was good enough, though.
That's the thing. Moving in with my parents was the good enough help that I should have accepted earlier. I don't think it would have been as much of a downpour that I had
Right.
if I would have accepted it. So that then brings me to, I progressively was getting better, because I had support. And that's why I think supporting community, it can really change the trajectory of your whole story. And that support can look different, because I'm that support could be medication, that support could be a therapist. The support can be so many different things. And for me, my parents, they changed my whole story. And that's the thing. And I'm so grateful and I'm so blessed that I had that as an option, because I know that that's not an option extended to everyone. And so I progressively got better. And then I was able to talk about and use myself as a case study when I'm talking to other providers and professionals.
Is the final chapter of your own lived perinatal mental health tale. Does that chapter occur at the PSI conference? Was that sort of your bookend moment?
I don't know if our books ever really end.
Well said.
I think it's the end of that chapter.
Yeah.
So it didn't necessarily end at the PSI conference. I think what it did was it opened up a brand new chapter of the story.
Oh.
That's the thing. It was a new one. I didn't expect for that to happen either. I just went and I was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to show up at the PSI conference and I'm going to present supporting military families during pregnancy and postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Going to be perfect. Was super excited because I was like, PSI actually selected me to present. This is,
Great.
so that whole thing. I was excited to see folks that I had connected with online, I actually see them in person. I also assisted with the support groups leaders. We had a breakout session as well. So it was great to see my other support group leaders in person
It's
for
so
the first time. Like,
exciting. You went from
yeah, you know how
feeling
it's like,
super lonely for, big chunk of time, and now you're doing the kind of work that you like doing. You're like doing
mhm,
patience things. You're back, kind of getting back to patience, right? And you're surrounded by people that are so
mhm.
passionate about the same types of things. It is like incredible.
And I always say that like the PSI conference is a different kind of conference than I've ever attended because it's just like you feel like it's all these friends finally being able
Oh,
to hang out that haven't seen each other.
yeah.
That was just really, really nice. My mom also joined me at the conference.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, and I remember Jen Davis. I met Jen Davis and she said, "Your mom's here?" I was like, "Yeah." She's just like, "Is she coming to your workshop?" And I told her, I said, "I don't think she's allowed. Wouldn't she have to be like registered?" And she said, "Wendy would be upset if she found out that your mom was here and she didn't see your workshop."
Yep.
And so I remember telling my mom, like, "I think you can come to my workshop." And so she did. She came, and I remember her sitting a little bit towards the back. And my mom actually was in the Navy. That's how my parents met.
Oh,
And my mom deployed while she was in her postpartum period.
oh, wow.
Yeah. She herself had to do that while she was postpartum. And so from doing this work, she always just says, "I'm so happy y'all are doing this. I'm just so happy you all are doing this." Like, it's so important. It's so needed. But like, it was a very nice moment to have because when I shared my bio, I also share that I'm a Navy brat and an Air Force spouse. And I was
Mhm.
like, and one of the members that of the Navy is right back there. She's sitting right back there
Mhm.
with you all. And so everybody turns and looks. And of course, in the back, and I was like, "That's my mom. Go on ahead, wave to the people, wave to everyone," and stuff like that. So I just she told me not to do that, so of course I did it.
First, yeah.
Because she told me not to tell anyone that she was in the room, but I was able to highlight and showcase that because she herself had a lot of sacrifices and things in her story that she didn't even realize until doing this work. So she just
Mm.
really appreciates this space that we're all working in
Mhm.
too. But
Yeah.
it really opened a different chapter.
Mhm.
And I attended the Alliance meetup, and Andrea shared that there was a position available at the meetup. So she was just like, "Hey, everyone," she made like a general announcement. And she was like, "Just in case there's anyone in the room or if you all know of anyone who might fit this position." So, like I said, saw some colleagues of mine who I met online, but we saw each other in person. And we were at a long table, swiped their heads and looked down at me.
I
All
remember that. I remember hearing this story. Oh, yeah.
all three of them turned and they swiped and looked their heads at me. And they were like, "You need you need to apply. You need to apply."
Mhm.
And Andre was still talking, doing her spill because I was just like shaking my head, like, "No, no, I don't need to apply." Like, I was just like, "No, I don't need to." And then Angel, she's a doula. She's also a military spouse, and she's a support group leader as
Mhm.
well. I remember her grabbing Andrea while she was talking on the mic, and she said,
Oh.
"I need to talk to you after this." And so she was like, "Okay." And afterwards, she pulls up like my social media because what they were hiring for was a communication strategist primarily to handle social media for the alliance. And so
Mhm.
she pulls it up. And then my two other girls from Tennessee, Shamika and
Oh,
Janina,
yeah.
they get around her and they were just like, "That's your communication strategist."
Here's
And
what's gonna happen.
yeah, and so and so at this point, I cannot turn and walk away. Like, I can't be like, "Hello, no," even though I had met her the day before.
Uh-huh.
So that's where it's just like, "Okay, patience." I slide on over, and Andre was like, "Here is my card. Can you send me your resume?" sure thing. Like, I just sat there and I'm looking at them like, well, now I have to apply. That moment right there, they were just like, that's your person. And they literally were like pulling up my social media as like my portfolio because I started a blog in 2019 called Whoa Mama. And from starting that blog, of course, I started posting on social media.
Mhm.
So I had social media content centered around perinatal mental health, self care, motherhood. And what I would do is I would mix expert tips in with my own journey and kind of share it from that lens of a story. And so when they pulled that up, it was literally like a portfolio
Oh, yeah.
that they were able to show. And they were like, she talks about this all the time. Like this, it's like,
This is her jam.
and so when she kind of was peeking at it and looking at it, it was just like, okay, well, you should apply. We ran into Jen Davis. Jen Davis goes up and gets her laptop and was like,
She's
oh no, let's
oh,
apply right now.
you don't have any. These are your plans right now. Get over here.
Like, let me help you write the thing that goes with the thing, and let's send it. Yeah, yeah.
You've got a reference. You've got.
So that was the funny thing where I was just like, Megan, Carrie, could you all be like a reference for me? And they're like, absolutely. Like, what? Okay. It was like complete full circle because also bouncing around from place to place. Before I left Nebraska, I had my full-time job and my private practice. And I had planned on going back to my full-time job. I loved it. I was working as a military family life counselor, loved it. But then we got our orders to move. And so when I was coming off of maternity leave, I ended up moving instead of going back to work. And I kept telling myself, I wouldn't mind going back to traditional work outside of my private practice and still just doing that on the side. But where do I want to work? Like, I kept asking myself that. And I told myself it just was random. I said, I would like to work for PSI. But at the time, I didn't know what I just kept saying, but what would you do at PSI? Like, what would be a job available? Goes to the conference. And I
The
think
universe was like, hold my tea. Hang on.
It was like you put it out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind of, and all of a sudden get there, hear about a job.
Okay.
Others see that I'm capable. And they're like, girl, you need to apply. Stop. Like, stop this. Cut it. And I like to say that they like pushed or they pushed me.
They gave you that friendly nudge.
Extra one that kind of gets you a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was able to have more conversations with Andrea at the conference. So I did get like that in-person, face-to-face time with her, which I think was really good when you're trying to, make that first impression. So I was like, well, that's perfect. She sat in on my workshop. So I was like super nervous. When I saw her show up, I was like,
not only is your mom there, the director of the alliance is there. You're about to apply for a job.
No pressure at all. And then Jen Davis has my camera snapping pictures. And she's like, get your mom up here.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it was great. It was great. It was definitely a full circle moment. And then I get back home. Yeah. I get to have an interview with Andrea, Wendy, Jessica, and then they offered me the job.
Well, we are so happy that you're here. I think that for many of us at PSI, working here for different reasons in different ways is full circle. I'm so glad that you're here. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's about time that we hop into the lightning round if you're ready for that. You look shocked. No other choice. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey.
Cue the lightning sounds. Oh, wait, lightning doesn't make a sound. Boom, boom. God.
Okay. Patients, besides this podcast, what is your favorite podcast if you'd like to recommend one?
Yes. Live Like Her is a wonderful podcast by a licensed therapist, Alicia Codwell. She has bite-sized episodes. So for those of us that might be in a hurry, might be in a rush, but we want like a quick inspirational, like y'all, her storytelling is like no other.
Does she have specific content, like a theme, topics, or just?
So it's mental health related, but she will always leave not only with a message, but she'll leave with a tip of something that you can like do right then and there. And then just a beautiful way of it being described.
I love that.
That's a
Do
good one.
you prefer a book in your hand or a book in your ear?
One in my hand.
Reading anything fabulous right now?
I have books that I have bought. I haven't opened them yet. I bought a book last week called Holier Than Thou. Some of my girlfriends want to read it together.
Okay.
It is a book, but it's also a guided journal.
Oh.
And the guided journal, y'all, life-changing. So, but I will put it out there. This is for, if you are a Christian, this would be the guided journal for you. If you aren't, then you may not like it as much just because it does go into scripture. So just kind of, I don't want anybody to be blindsided by that.
That's fair.
But Believing Bigger by Marshawn Evans Daniels. It is a beautiful guided journal, but it's also a life-changing journal. It's 100 days of Believing Bigger. So it's 100 entries. So it goes over quite a long time.
What's your go-to for a quick mental break? Because I'm guessing it's not reading.
Sick bird.
It's not right now. You're busy. It's not your fault.
Not right now. So music. That's my kind of like survival self-care that helps me get through the day. I intentionally couple the walks with like mental health.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm team walks too. What's your best parenting hack?
So this is one that I actually just shared with my husband today. We've been having issues with brushing my 2-year-old's teeth.
Oh, yeah. No, they don't like it.
He does not want to brush his teeth. However, he will let his older brother brush his teeth.
Oh, that's a power move.
That was the one that I just discovered this week because I feel like we're always coming up with hacks because our kids are always changing every day and every week.
Oh, yeah. Patience, what is one way you'll show yourself some radical love today? Is it that walk?
It's the walk.
Yeah.
You guessed it. It's the walk. It's the walk with the music. I will probably be playing while I walk. I've been listening to Beyonce's Alien Superstar a lot, as well as the song Float by Janelle Monáe, because those actually like make me feel confident and they make me kind of like feel myself. And so I like to do that.
Final question. How do you take your water?
This was the one I wasn't sure about.
I mean,
I have water right here. I try to drink a gallon of water a day. So I drink my water in a half gallon because it's easy for me to carry around versus the full gallon.
A gallon? Hold on. I'm going your gallon of water.
I used to carry around a gallon.
Great. Patience, if anybody would like to get a hold of you or find you on social media, how could they do that?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at whoamama_blog, and that's on Instagram, and that is also on Facebook. And then on LinkedIn, I'm under there just as Patience Riley, as well as on Pinterest. And I just started a Whoa Mama YouTube channel because I want to share some of just those mindfulness tips and things of that nature that I do share and post on Instagram. I want them to now be on YouTube. So that is like brand spanking new. But one of the best ways to like know about like my work or to get connected with me in that capacity is my website, whoamamas.com.
Okay.
That is one of the best ways. I send out a monthly newsletter that has mental health tips and things of that nature. And just things, what am I doing? So I'll be highlighting when you all share the podcast. That'll be popping up in there as well so that people can check it out.
Emily, would you like to take us out?
Yeah. Patience, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. and walking us through all of your check marks, because I think especially like to see all of those little snapshots of things that could be risk factors in aggregate, that became what was unsustainable for you. And I think it's important for people to hear that, like, it's not any one thing. It can be a bunch of small things in aggregate. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for taking time to hang out with us.
Thanks, Patience.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Am One podcast. Check out today's show notes where we'll drop links to all the important things that we mentioned in this episode. Please consider sharing about I Am One on social media and following and rating our show wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute of your time and, well, that'll help our collective mission of bringing resources and local support to folks worldwide. From everyone here at PSI, thanks again for listening.